Evening, everyone. I'm Russ with Gold Seal. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's great to have you with us. Gold Seal has been broadcasting a wide variety of streams for manned aircraft pilots. This show tonight is the first of many for the remote pilot side of the house. And the topic is one that is critical for any commercial drone pilot: insurance. We're simultaneously streaming on both Facebook and YouTube. If you're watching on either of these, join in the fun and post your comments and questions in the comment box. You may also tweet us directly using hashtag #ProtectMyDrone. Now, with a complex subject like insurance, we really need to have a subject matter expert on board, and we definitely have that with Evan Garmon of Harpenow Insurance, based in Troy, Indiana. Evan has already established himself on the internet as the go-to guy for insurance, and I can promise you that in the specialty area of unmanned aircraft, he's the man you want to talk to. Evan, how are you doing tonight? It's great to see you, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Russ. Yeah, looking forward to tonight's episode.
Well, it's gonna be a lot of fun, and this is really a critical topic and something that probably a lot of people don't really have a lot of information on. For people who are starting a business, possibly for their first time, they're looking for ways to protect themselves, primarily and financially. In most cases, I see people all the time saying that, well, I've got to get my LLC and that'll protect me. Well, I'm not an attorney, and I don't think you are either, but I'm pretty sure that an LLC may not give people the protection they think it is. The layer of protection most people probably need is insurance. Would you agree with that?
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. There's only so much you can do with the legal aspect, the way you set up your business. Obviously, if someone causes a major accident, liability is going to go after the operator. That's just what we see here is going to happen no matter what. So having just a single member LLC, again, you might as well be operating as a sole proprietorship as well. So I would say the insurance piece is definitely important for those operations, just to have that extra layer of protection.
Yep, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Well, to get started, I know you work for Harpenow Insurance. Could you take just a moment and tell us a little bit about your own background and how your company works with remote pilots in the insurance business?
Yeah, so I started at Harpenow Insurance in 2014. Whenever I got on, they required me to find my own niche, something that I love talking about, and I could do the insurance for just people in the industry. So I'd kind of always had a fascination with drones ever since I was little. There's a picture out there of me flying this one that's actually it's a drone it's connected to the remote control. So I mean, it was a little toy. I mean, it was made of styrofoam, had some propellers, but I've always had that fascination. So I skipped to 2015. I'd found out from one of our carriers that drone insurance is a thing, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. I want to be involved in this industry. So first two policies we sold in 2015. There were clients that found me through my Twitter account, of all things, and I just started talking about drone insurance. And 2016, it really took off for us. We got endorsed by a association, UAVSA. So we were their preferred vendor for insurance for all their members. So we got quite a bit of momentum going out of that program. And then the 107 came out, and so we had already been started to establish ourselves pretty well in 2016. And from that point on, it's just been constant. We get requests all the time. I'm really active on the
Gotcha.
social media websites. So.
Okay, well, let's get started out with some basic definitions to get people on board with what's going on in the insurance business. We've got hull insurance, liability insurance, professional liability. We've got workers' compensation. I think the term hull probably started out in the maritime days when Lloyd's of London was probably insuring ships crossing the Atlantic Ocean, and it went on into aviation insurance, and now that's hull insurance is to protect the aircraft itself. But how would you describe some of these basic definitions for people, types of insurance?
Yeah, so hull, again, that's the airframe. So the actual unit itself is going to be the hull. So when you insure it on policy, I use the terms physical damage and hull almost interchangeably, just because hull is kind of an outdated term. And a lot of people kind of look at me confused when I talk about that, or they just say, "What is that?" So you just say it's the actual unit. So I know, of course, hull coverage is going to be whenever you crash your drone, that's the coverage you want on your policy. So you select the value that you want to insure your drone for. When a claim happens, you report it up as soon as possible, of course, try to protect the unit from any further damage. And then The claims are usually handled. They've been handled pretty quickly. I mean, within less than a week, we've been seeing people get uh, their claim money back from the carrier. So, and then we talked
Yes, let me
about.
let me ask a real quick question about whole insurance. Now, is it automatically cover payload, for example, gimbals and cameras, or is that something else that people have to be concerned with when they're talking about getting insuring their equipment?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. We've seen it. So the thing that came out with it was all those combo kits. Everyone said they've got like an Inspire 2 combo kit or something. So they would insure it for the total package value. Uh, the carrier started to come around to that since it was happening so much. But really, what should be happening is any payload, ground equipment should be scheduled separately. And there is places for that on applications where you schedule your cameras. You'll see the serial numbers for them. Any type of ground equipment you may have, control stations, controllers. So it is recommended to definitely schedule it out separate from the unit. And we could talk about some different claim situations where that may come in handy for you.
Okay, well, how about the different types of liability insurance? What do they cover, and what are they looking for as far as being an operator?
Yeah, so we've seen just about everything. I'm pretty sure with people bringing us contracts to review with insurance requirements. Of course, the main thing that UAV operators need, the UAV liability policy, and that's going to be the main chunk of what we write here with this program. It's the liability that the UAV causes. So it's you can think of it just it's an aircraft policy. So if the aircraft hits something, that's where the liability is coming from. Then this policy picks that up to, of course, the policy limits. If it hits a person, if it hits their property, that's the type of stuff the liability is going to cover. Of course, when we say liability, I mean, just break that down. That's if you're legally obligated to reimburse someone. I mean, that's essentially what we're looking at here. If you cause damage, injure someone, that's what this policy's for.
Okay, so
And
liability typically covers the damage you may cause to another person's property, correct?
for themselves, yeah. Bodily injury is
Yeah.
part of that. So.
Okay. So if somebody wants to come after, let's say it's something very hard to put a number on, like you damage somebody and you make them go and they're blinded or something, and they come after you for $1 million or something. They come after you for more than just a value of replacing a broken windshield or something. Is that different coverage, or how does that work?
No, it's all in that main limit there in the policy. So it would again it would pay for their medical bills. So that's an important thing. I believe you can include rehabilitation costs in there if you're legally obligated to pay that, and of course, yeah, any type of judgments that come from that. That's what this policy is going to be there for. Of course, yeah, the worry is someone gets hit in the eyes. That's going to be the most sensitive tissue that a propeller would most likely damage pretty severely. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, there's a term that I've heard, and I basically know what it means, but I'm not sure if it applies in this situation or not. That is, remote pilots out there doing commercial work. Waivers of subrogation. Is this something that remote pilots can get, or should they get, or does it even apply?
Oh yeah, we see companies requesting to have a waiver of subrogation added to policies all the time. So a waiver of subrogation, it's actually just an endorsement, but it can also be specific in the contract. Essentially, a waiver of subrogation. Again, I'm not a contract attorney, but when it's in the contract, what you're going to find is any type of negligence on that company that could come back to them. You're essentially waiving that right to get reimbursed by that company that you may be working for. So most of the time, it's going to be a contractor. Um, they're going to be doing work if it's some type of negligence, maybe on the main client's part that you're working for. For instance, like physical damage claims right now. If they tell you to fly somewhere, uh, something happens along those lines, if there's a waiver of subrogation in there, the insurance carrier is not going to go after them or their insurance carrier to get the reimbursement. So
Okay. All right.
you're
Uh,
waiving that right there. So,
Okay, understand. Now remember, this is a dialogue, and we want you, the viewers, to be involved in this. If you have some questions or comments, please put them in the chat box. I see one of our Gold Seal members, Rob Vitek. He has chimed in or stepped in here. Glad to have him tonight, and he's got a question, and we may get at that in a little bit. But let's get some questions in here and keep this thing rolling as a dialogue.
yep.
You and I mentioned this afternoon UAS exclusions and policies. What can we say about that? Things that
Yeah,
an operator should be aware of, exclusions.
yeah. So again, these policies they're not standard. They definitely differ in the exclusions. That's where you're going to find where some of the pricing structures are going to may be a cheaper policy, but there may be more exclusions. There is a policy out there right now that's gaining popularity, uh, and they are actually excluding night flights. So if you read into it, that's something on the application. They say it right away that night flights are not going to be covered. Same with payload in that instance. But for the policies we tend to write, we try to have the most broadly worded policy coverages, and that's global aerospace, which you'll see in our portal system. We've kind of been able to filter it out. We see that they've got a really great policy offering, but they're also going forward and backing it. Some of the typical exclusions, though, you'll see just in many insurance policies. Obviously, the UAV policy is not going to cover any type of workers' compensation claim. That's what workers' compensation policy is for. Employer's liability goes right along with that. So if it's an employer's liability claim, chances are that maybe a workers' compensation claim wasn't covered, and the employer goes after, or the employee goes after the employer. So this is not going to be a policy for that type of liability. Contractual liability is something else that you'll find in there, and that's if you can't complete the terms of a contract and someone comes after you, this is not really intended to pick that up. So then, of course, on the physical damage side, really, I mean, there's not a lot that's not covered. I would say the main thing that we see is just regular wear and tear on units. Wear and tear, of course, being if you're flying hundreds of hours or you're not changing out the motors, and all of a sudden, the next time you try to put it up and it's just all stalled out, that's not going to be something that's covered. Obviously, that's going to be more of a maintenance issue. It's just happened over time. But the thing is, if you have a maintenance issue that causes an accident, that would be covered because that'd be like a crash situation, similar to what you saw in those photos there. So, in terms of physical damage, again, intentional use. I also got to say that intentional use is not covered as well. So if someone says, "Well, I need a new drone anyway, I'll just accidentally crash this," there is ways the carriers and the claims adjusters they'll be able to kind of root it out if they ask the questions hard enough for you. So just be honest with them. So yeah, that's
Okay.
then of course damaged property that you own won't also be covered if you crash into it. So
Okay. Well, I want to come back to this workman's compensation in just a second. But Cameron Smith, a good friend of ours from the internet, he sent us a question, and let's take a look. He says, "Hi, gents. Would it be more beneficial to get insurance after becoming an LLC, or getting it as an individual, or would it be better to get it as an individual and transferring it to an LLC later?" My guess is that the LLC, I don't know. I'm going to turn this one over to you as the
yeah.
expert.
So it really depends if they're doing operations under an individual name as a sole proprietorship. Again, you have almost no protection in that type of instance if you were to cause an accident. So I would say set it up as soon as you start operations. If that says that you're going to be starting operations as a just under your name, just John Doe doing business as aerial drone services or something along those lines, at least get the policy set up there. The UAV policies are actually really easy to make name changes on. So we can transfer it over to an LLC or corporation if that's the case. So definitely, yeah, if you're worried about maybe things are going to change in the future, set it up as an individual because then you can just flow right into get insured as an LLC.
Okay, well, let's go back quickly to just a little bit more coverage on the workman's compensation, because if for no other reason, I don't know a lot about it. So if you're doing a job for a client and one of the things he may ask you is, "Do you have workman's comp?" How do you answer him?
Well, it depends on the state. So all the state regulations regarding workers' compensation, they're all over the place. So it
Okay.
really takes. I mean, we've got resources where we're able to go in and see what the requirements are. Chances are, if you at least have one other person, you're going to be workers' compensation. Most states is going to be a requirement, even if it's a part-time worker. I believe it's California and maybe Florida. If you have part-time workers, you're gonna have to double check on that. That's the case. You have to get workers' compensation. So when you're being required to have it by a company to do work with, if you're not required to have it by your state, you may be able to negotiate a exclusion form for workers' compensation. Uh, I never recommend it right off the bat, not because I'm trying to sell another policy, but if you think about workers' compensation, it's healthcare coverage for when you get injured on the job. The rates are usually reasonable. If you just have to cover just yourself and maybe one other person, maybe again, most states we're seeing policies starting off a couple $100 to maybe as most as maybe like $1,200 or so a year for workers' compensation if you're covering some other people. So, uh, but again, it is somewhat negotiable. We've had clients that have had it inside of the contract requirements, and we've been able to work with them, get the right exclusion forms sent up to the state, and they've been able to just not have it. So again, it's going to be something if they ever do get an employee, they'll have to get it. But yeah, single member LLCs typically you're most likely excluded in your own state, and you just have to get the right paperwork to send up to your client.
Okay, we do have another question here from UAV experts, and I'm going to go ahead and read this one off the screen, off my screen here. Well, we actually have it up here, and we can all read it together. UAV Experts, by the way, is one of our partners. They do hands-on flight training. So if you have yourself or a group of people need to get some hands-on flight training, check out uavexperts.com. They have a lot of big corporate clients, including Fox TV affiliates nationwide, CoStar, people like that. At any rate, the question from UAV Experts is, the aircraft collisions are rampant for the aircraft exclusions are rampant for UAV resellers and even hobby shops. Does Evans Company broker coverage for stores, and how does it compare to a BOP? Now, Evan, I apologize, I don't know what a BOP is. What about product liability? You want to take a stab at that one, Evan?
Yeah. Yeah, so BOP, I'll just say that's a business owner's policy where it's usually the property coverage and liability coverage are automatically just combined together. Uh, Again, mainly you're looking at small retail stores like a hobby shop that is sometimes eligible for a business owner's policy. The problem is, like they said in the question here, there is an aviation exclusion. Most policies are now starting to get really specific and excluding drones and unmanned aerial vehicles in the policies. So we can do this. We are working with a few different retail shops right now that are having this issue in a couple different states. I'll tell you though that if we go with the aviation carriers, we can do an aviation general liability policy that would cover the premises exposure and the product's liability exposure. What you're going to find, though, the rates are much higher than what you would find on a BOP policy or just even a standard just commercial general liability policy than what competitors would be getting in a similar business where they don't have that much drone exposure, where they may be selling just smaller drones, plane or like hobby planes, trains, race cars, that sort of stuff. So it is something that we've been working on. We've got a solution we think that we're going to try to hammer down here in the next week for a client that's had a kind of a really he's had a need for quite a while here. So yes, it is something we can do. I will say though that the prices have scared a lot off just because of the aircraft exposure with the product's liability.
Okay. All right. And anyone who has any specific questions after you starting business hours tomorrow, please go to harpandnowinsurance.com, look up the phone number, give Evan a call. I'm sure he can answer your questions in any amount of detail. Evan, you and I were talking earlier today about client requirements. What are some of the special client requirements that you've seen in the past?
Yeah, so we've seen just about all of it. We had one client we had to get about 7 different types of insurance policies for them to go and just to even get inside with this company, just for the approval process. So some of these requirements, the most standard ones we'll see, obviously the UAV policy. If you don't have that, that would be the first place to start. Commercial general liability is another one we commonly see. Commercial general liability, or the general liability, is going to actually have it's going to have an aviation exclusion in it. So it's really going to be for those operations that may also be following up with ground photography work, videography work, or doing something a little bit different than just a full-time drone operation. So that's always something. Again, we see that mainly with construction companies where they automatically require commercial general liability for their contractors. But again, you've also got to remember some of this stuff is always negotiable. So in the right circumstances, working with the right company, you may be able to get just the UAV policy to suffice it for you. Now, some of the other stuff we've seen, of course, I mentioned workers' compensation. That's something, again, it's on a state level. So we kind of covered that a little bit. Business auto coverage, that's something that we are starting to see a little bit more of, especially as people start putting decals on their cars, really making their personal vehicle their main business vehicle.
Sure.
If they're covering that uh, on a personal auto policy, if they're going from job site to job site, causing accidents, obviously someone attorney claims attorney is probably going to see that as hey, this is a business, we're going to go after them as well to get these medical bills paid and whatever else we can get out of it. So this definitely having a business auto policy is, I would say, is going to be recommended if you're going to be driving a lot to and from job sites. Other stuff we've seen, professional liability. There's cases if you're working with typically engineering firms or doing some type of either mapping, um, different types of inspection work, you may be required by your client to cover yourself for professional liability. And
Yeah.
I don't think we covered that. I wanted to cover that earlier. Professional liability is, it's different than general liability. Professional is if you make a uh, if you make a professional judgment or you provide work and it causes financial loss to your client. Again, no bodily injury or property damage. If it just causes financial loss to them and they want to bring a lawsuit against you for that, that's where professional liability picks up. It's a very litigious type policy where, again, it could be that you may have gone and mapped out 20 years of property, uh, and come to find out after the fact that you did the entire wrong property. So that's stuff there that you would see with in terms of claims. So, but again, it even goes into if you start doing engineering work and different stuff like that for the client after you get the UAV photos. Professional liability is the policy you will definitely want to look into. So, I'd say
Yeah.
that's the one that most UAV operators have the most success getting excluded from the policies as well. Once you start figuring out they're just providing photos, if something happens, they just go back out and do it again. The client will be happy. So
Yeah,
umbrella
professional
coverage.
liability is can be a big thing. I know for flight instructors of manned aircraft, it's a big issue, and it's a bigger issue depending on whether or not you have any real personal assets. So I think we might both agree that if you have some decent assets personally owned, whether or not you're doing something as a business or not, you probably need professional liability to protect those assets.
Right.
Okay, we've got questions coming in here. I want to break it up for just a real quick comic relief, if nothing else. We got these cool caps made recently. Got the Gold Seal logo on the front, and we've got the FAA remote pilot across the back. So these are great things to wear when you're out on a job. We'll give these away. I've got one of these to give away, and here's the question. So get ready for the question. The first person to type this in the comments box is going to win this. So who was the first man in space? Not really having anything to do with insurance or remote pilots, but a good question nonetheless. Now we do have a lot of different streams that we're getting comments on. So our software back here queues them all up. So we're going to see the person who comes in with the correct answer first. So we'll see who we can give this hat to. While we're getting that in, Evan, how about a generalized look at some of the previous claims that you've had to handle? You probably had some pretty interesting ones.
Oh yeah, we've had some definitely interesting ones. Very first claim. Again, I'm not going to mention any clients or anything. The first claim we had that I remember was back in, I believe, 2004 or 2016. There was a physical damage claim. So someone had their drone on the back of a boat, and wave came up, hit the boat, and the drone went down all the way to the bottom of the ocean. So it was about 400 feet down. So they couldn't get it back. Uh, so we've seen water losses, theft claims is something else we've seen. We've had a gentleman who got his entire drone and everything else with it stolen out of the back of his car. He went in to, I think it was just like go into his house, just grab something, some paperwork or something. He went back out to his car. Somebody had broken in and stolen everything. So I'd say that's one that definitely it's something that's going to be a lot harder if you're in maybe a more urban area to guard against. If you leave your stuff out in a car, obviously it's going to be easy pickings for anyone just to bust out the window and take it. So The most interesting claim I'd say was that I didn't think was ever going to be covered. We had a gentleman that he had rented a thermal camera from another. It was actually another client of ours now, but at the time he wasn't. He rented the camera from a gentleman. We had it on the policy for a temporary period of time, so we can do that as well. If you're renting stuff and you need
Okay.
to cover it, we can do that as well. So he had it on there for 3 days. On the third day, he had one of his buddies or an intern that was going to put it back in the box and ship it back. Well, he started looking at it and dropped the camera on the concrete floor. Again, $12,000 FLIR camera.
Yikes.
Well, he put it back in the box after covering it up with some Sharpie, sent it back, and we got a call from the owner of the camera saying, "This thing, it's all dinged up. Well, what can we do about this?" Uh, I said, "Well, I don't know. We can really do much because it's just cosmetic damage, really." And he was like, "Well, I'm trying to resell this." So we filed the claim. And I was thinking, okay, this is probably going to have to be some type of arbitration type deal where they're just going to have to talk it out, figure out how much our client's going to owe. We got it back that they were going to cover the claim as Global Aerospace. So they actually covered the camera for the replacement cost was then $10,000. So, and the funny thing was, our client was actually able to buy the camera back at a salvage value from the carrier. So that's been one of the most interesting situations I've been a part of. I just think that goes to show these carriers are not looking to deny a lot of claims right now. We've heard again some other interesting cases, mainly all physical damage related. Uh, that it's unbelievable what they're actually willing to cover in some cases for drone operators. So.
Okay. Well, we actually had a question. I saw it scroll by here. Let me get it to it again. Oh, it's from Apex Aerial Imaging. Are there policies offered which cover equipment, for example, cameras, being rented on a regular basis? You kind of almost touched on this in just what you were talking about. So what about rental equipment?
Rental, it's always a touchy one. A lot of insurance carriers really don't like doing rental insurance. The UAV policy, it's really no different. Obviously, if you're going to be renting out your gear to someone, maybe on just an occasional basis, your policy will pick that up. You just have to make sure though that the operator is going to be approved by you. So if you rent out to someone and they turn around and they rent it out to another person, that's going to be a case where there may actually not be coverage there. You have to have an approved licensed pilot behind the sticks, or at least over the operation. So that's one of those deals. Again, if you know the person, you trust them, I'd say you could go for it. You may also want to make sure that they have their own coverage. Your policy is not going to pick up any of their claims if they hurt somebody. So just be sure of that. What they would need is actually to either schedule the drone to their policy for if they're going to be using it for more than 30 days. If not, if it's just they just need another drone. Most policies now have what's called non-owned UAV liability insurance automatically included in the policy. And it's to cover those situations where you may need a rental drone. Uh, you can cover it for that liability that you may cause, but you could also endorse in non-owned physical damage coverage. So if you're renting out, I would definitely recommend if the person has a UAV policy, just make sure you get a certificate of insurance showing that they have the non-owned UAV liability coverage as well as the non-owned physical damage coverage to make sure that your unit's going to be covered, or at least your deductible is going to be covered if you also have your unit insured. And that's typically how it's going to work. Is the main policy that's covering the unit will be the one to pick up. Their policy, again, if you don't have any type of waivers or subrogation in there, then your carrier may go after their policy to pick up the funds. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, a little voice in my ear told me that we have a winner of the cap. So it's a pretty nice cap too. So I don't know if we've got the Rotor Trek. Rotor Trek has won the FAA remote pilot cap. So we'll get in touch with you after the broadcast and we'll get it squared away on how to get it to you. So let's go on. Let's go to another issue. And this is something that's really talked about quite a lot in the Facebook forums and Facebook groups and in the message forums. And it's the temporary insurance or the insurance on demand. It's a very popular topic. What can we tell people about that?
Oh, there's a lot. I've done an article on the difference between the annual policy and the on-demand type option that's out there. Obviously, the main one out there right now is Verify Insurance. It is underwritten through Global Aerospace, which again we use Global Aerospace to write a majority of our policies. Excuse me, that we issue as well. So the difference, what you're going to find, the on-demand option, it's on demand. It's when you need it. The thing I've kind of been not really disappointed in, but I just feel like it's kind of missing the mark is since it is on demand. If you are going to a client's job site and you don't have the policy set up, let's say you're charging batteries or something like that, and we all know lipos have a tendency to catch fire every now and then. If that's the case and you don't have Verify set up, you don't have any type of insurance coverage at all. So then again, you're looking back to, okay, what's my basic protection? If you have an LLC, good luck with that.
Yeah,
But if
right.
you are
Not much.
if it's sole proprietorship, even worse, you're essentially going to be the one that's responsible for that if that's the case. So I would say again, it has its perks for being again on demand. You're able to know what the cost is for that flight and bill the client. Uh, but we were also looking at, most of these policies, they're about $10 an hour is the least amount you can purchase it for. So if you work it out with what we're seeing the UAV policies going for at about 50 hours, you're actually almost breaking even if you could try to go with a Verify model versus just getting an annual policy. Again, I know prices are going to change, but right now we're seeing policy prices for $1 million liability on a drone at about $600 on average. Again, they are coming down slightly depending on your intended use. So I would say, again, with Verify and those other on-demand options that are going to come out there, you just have to really budget out how much you think you're going to fly over the year, and then that's going to be what determines your best option. If you're trying to go for more cost affordable, definitely look at the annual policy if you're going to be a full-time operator. If you're going for the route that you're just going to bill all those invoices directly to the client, then you may be able to get away with Verify, but just know you may not have coverage if you don't set it up or if they have a glitch in their system. That's again the other kind of vulnerability there. If you are not in an area where you can get coverage and you didn't set it up before you left anymore, uh, that's the issues you're going to have. With the annual policy, you don't have to worry about it. It's going to be there as long as you pay your premium. You don't have any other outstanding premiums to pay. It's going to be there. So.
Okay, so if somebody's going to be using on-demand insurance, they certainly better make sure that they have adequate coverage too, not just over the time period, but as far as their actual coverage.
Right, and something else that can be said about it. Most of the clients that we work with, they were using Verify for the longest time, or another. Again, I think Verify is about the only on-demand out there. But they've since said, "Hey, my costs are getting out of control. I feel like I'm getting nickel and dimed every time I go to the app and have to pay it." And that $10 an hour is not always the case. That's the minimum. So you may have a couple jobs where it's like $25 an hour. So that's something else to consider is maybe in your geographic area. But also, there are some clients that will not accept it, especially when you start getting into those contracts, the contract requirements. They want a insurance policy where they could see, all right, it starts on this date and it ends on this date a year later. So,
Okay, we've got a question here coming in from William Syntax. William, thanks for being with us tonight, buddy. And this is actually one that I wanted to touch on. If you have a waiver for night flight, how does this affect your insurance? Now, and this is kind of something that we have worked with people a lot on they're actually a daylight waiver. It's a waiver from the regulations to fly at night. We do this in our training program. But how does this affect insurance? Is there some special type of coverage needed?
so again, it really depends on your policy. There's some out there that right now we know of at least one that's excluding night flights. The one we offer, again, we've chosen it because it is one of the more broadly worded ones. As long as you have the appropriate waivers in place, there's going to be coverage there. If it's one of those deals though that you're flying right on that border, something happens and you shouldn't have probably been flying, I don't want to say it's going to be covered, but there's a good chance right now with what we're seeing in claims that they're probably still going to at least try to go to bat for you if there is an accident that happens in those hours after you shouldn't have been flying. But again, I don't want to say that's for sure going to be or for sure going to be covered in that type of accident. So again, read your policy. Just make sure that it's not specifically excluded, because if that's the case, then there's not going to be coverage at all.
Okay, and Steve K just sent us in a question. It goes right into this Verifly thing. He says Verifly is not available in New York. Is there another on-demand coverage option? I know it's not your job to keep up with all the people offering this type of thing, but do you have any ideas, or should he just do a Google search? How might he look for something?
New York it's a tough one, and also the other state I believe Verify's not in right now is North Dakota, and that's due to again some just insurance regulatory stuff there at the state level. But no one in New York, I I'm not sure. Again, Verify is a separate company. They are a separate insurance broker that works with Global Aerospace. I know that they've been working on that to try to get it approved in the state because again, Verify is actually located in New York, so it's kind of interesting that they couldn't get it approved. As far as other options go, I know that there is supposed to be another similar type of. It's going to be a kind of a hybrid on annual policy with a on-demand option where an operator will be able to increase at any time. We've been waiting for that product to come out now for a couple months, so I'm not sure if it's just more of a regulatory thing that they're waiting on for it to be released, or uh, again, it's with when you start talking about insurance, you have to go to every single state department to get approval. So with New York, I know it's going to be a little bit more hoops to jump through. Just the way that the state's set up with the insurance department, there is a lot of hoops to jump through and getting stuff approved. So as far as I know right now, the best way that we've been able to ensure operations in New York is just on the annual policy.
Okay, UAV experts, again, our friends, has asked, do you see on-demand moving into hull coverage in the future? It's my understanding that on-demand was for hull coverage, but what do you think,
No,
Evan?
actually, so yeah, so the on demand it's liability only.
Okay, all
Again,
right, I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah, so it's
So
liability only. That should be
that's really important for people to know the difference then.
yeah. There's actually no coverage right now for your actual drone if you were to crash it. So that's the thing uh, I've also kind of had the issue with is some of these people are trying to use Verify to make sure that they're covering everything. Yeah, if you have a $5,000 drone, you're trying to go the Verify route. There's really not another option right now to cover the whole coverage. Most policies for inland marine policy is the one where you're going to cover equipment. Those are excluding aircrafts and now drones. So we've not really found another even separate haul policy out there to supplement what Verify is offering for the liability side. So um, again, I know that there's another program supposedly in the works here that's supposedly going to offer an on-demand type aspect to it, but it should be offering hull coverage for when you need it. Again, I don't have all the details on that; it's still not been released. But the thing with hull coverage is I don't see it ever being an on-demand option. Just the way that the premiums work out, the way the claims are going, I don't see it being able to. I don't see the carriers being able to afford it to go for an on-demand option anytime soon. Some of those pictures we had in the beginning of the episode here, those were some $70,000, $35,000 drones that and the payload. That's the other thing is the payload. There's a lidar system on there. It was $70,000 loss. So
Oh yeah,
I don't
that's a piece of
see
equipment.
exactly. I don't see the on-demand the way that it works being something that's going to be affordable, more something insurance carrier is going to want to look for. If you say, all right, I'm going to use Verify for everything, and you have a $30,000 drone, and you go to pay $10 for the liability, maybe 20, $25 or so, depending on how they structure it for the physical damage, there's not a lot on the table for the insurance carrier to actually cover the claims with. So I don't see physical damage or hull coverage being added to the on demand anytime soon. At least until the claims maybe start to settle down a little bit. We've seen some big ones here. So
Well, that piece of information alone is probably worth the cost of admission to this webinar because I wasn't aware of that. Cliff at UAV Experts was, but I suspect probably a lot of people weren't. They didn't distinguish between liability and hull insurance and have the understanding that if you're getting this on-demand type product, you're probably not getting hull insurance with it. So again, it's understanding what kind of coverage you need and what kind of coverage you're getting. If people come to your website, to try to get a quote from, I mean, how does that, you just send them to the website to work on a quote, or do they call you? What's one of the best ways for people to talk to you about insurance?
Well, usually a lot of people are talking to me just right through Facebook Messenger. Again, I try to at least get the conversation to email if possible, but chances are I'm going to just tell them, hey, check out our website. We've got a link here. The application it's on a portal system here. So you can just pull it up and just go right through it. It's only, again, you'll see there's a couple tabs there, but some of these are just really easy questions, just to click yes or no on some of them. Fill in your drone's information. And when you get to the end, if you answered everything and there was no red flags on your application, you'll get pricing right then and there. So I definitely recommend people check out the website, go to the UAV section, click on the get a quote now, and that takes you to the landing page for the portal system. Again, it's free to apply. There's no charges or anything. And if you want to pay through the portal system after you get the quote set up, it's really easy just to bind the policy on the spot. We've had someone that they contacted me, said, hey, I need coverage for this job I'm about to do. They require me to have, I can't use Verify. What do? I said, if you have your cell phone, go to the application, fill out your information, and you could pay with a credit card or a PayPal account and get the policy set up. And I mean, I saw the application come through and he was binding it in 5 minutes. So it's pretty quick, easy system. We could go up to $10 million of liability coverage. If you need more than that, we just have to get approval, but we can definitely go up to about 50 million if really easily.
Okay.
I think even one of our carriers will go up to 300 million if you have an operation that size that needs that amount of coverage. So.
Okay, gotcha. Rodney, Jonathan, thanks for chiming in with some questions. Both of these gentlemen have asked about AMA's insurance policies or programs that they're offering. I think that's fairly new with AMA. Are you familiar with any of it? Know anything about AMA's policies?
Yeah, I've looked into it. I got a quote. It was cheaper than, of course, what we're able to offer. But again, when you start talking about insurance, you've got to go back to what's actually covered in this. Night flights,
Yeah.
we know, is not going to be something that's going to be covered in that. And also payload. I don't believe that they have an option right now to add payload coverage to the policy. You can add the hull. From what it looks like, again, I've not actually gone through the actual policy. I can't get a copy of that since it's a dedicated program. And I'm not in the business right now to buy insurance from other companies because I'm a full-time insurance agent. So I would say the things to look for, again, is look at those exclusions, at least compare with another policy. Obviously, they're touting it as the cheapest option out there right now. I think they are going for new entrants into the business. Again, those people that are maybe tiptoeing the line between hobby use, getting into commercial use a lot more, just knowing the makeup of the AMA. So while it is going to be a cheap policy, there's going to be some exclusions in there. And also, I mean, with any type of insurance policy, you really have to look at what's the carrier's history of paying out claims. What's the type of service I'm going to get out of this policy? If someone calls our office, they're going to talk to me, or at least Amanda, who's been my CSR here for the past since about September or so. So, and we understand what's going on with the policies. And again, I just don't know much about that program. And I don't want to bash it at all. Again, it's something that we know it's on our radar. We know that they are coming in with probably about $150 cheaper in some cases for liability coverage, covering multiple units. So if that's something that someone needs, I say definitely look for it. If you need a person you want to chat with, if you have some specific insurance requirements, that's where we've been able to come in and bring to the table just a little bit more to kind of round out the insurance programs for a lot of operations that are starting to get larger and starting to have they actual need insurance, not just for contracts, but they just need the stuff just to protect their assets. So.
Gotcha. Well, AMA is a friend of Gold Seals. In fact, they use our UAVgroundschool.com as a member benefit. Anybody looking for any type of insurance, then they need to know the terms, they need to know what kind of coverage they want, and make sure they get the coverage they're expecting. I say knowledge is really a big part of this. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. You talk to just about anyone out there, what's the chance they've actually gone through and read every page in their insurance policy? I've read over a few times myself, so I understand that it's something that the average person is probably not going to be able to comprehend the first couple of times. They're going to need someone to explain stuff to them. Why is this policy written this way? What's this exclusion mean? So that's a thing where I step in. We could talk about that with the insured. If there is a specific exclusion in the policies, typically with general liability or something like that, usually you just have to pay a little bit more to get it covered, taken out of there. And that's the case actually with the war hull coverage right now. If there's again a war type accident, most carriers they'll separate it out so that you're going to pay a separate premium to get it actually covered back in the policy. And right now with global aerospace, it's all seamless. You don't even know that they've actually worked it in there. So there is an exclusion for it, but then they actually go and they pick it up in another form that says this overwrites that exclusion form essentially down the policy. So.
Okay, well, Evan, I think we've probably covered pretty much what we had planned tonight. Can you think of anything that we maybe left out that we want to touch on?
I didn't even talk about personal injury coverage. So that's another part.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so personal injury coverage, I'll just mention that real quick. Invasion of privacy is something that a lot of people are worried about getting sued for. And again, the main policy limits are going to cover bodily injury and physical damage. So, excuse me. So if someone sues you for, again, invasion of privacy or another situation like that, libel, slander, advertising, injury, the personal injury coverage is a separate limit that's going to be in the policy. In most policies right now, it seems like it's being automatically included if you want it for just a standard limit like $1 million, $2 million. Anything over that, you may have to pay a couple $100s per drone if you don't have any type of procedures in place. But most of the time, it's going to be automatically included. So I recommend people just putting it on there, especially if it's they're offering it to you for free. I would take it. So I don't see why I've had some clients that have gone through the application and said, well, I don't think I need it. And I say if it's free, you might as well put it on there. So it's only going to protect you in those situations where if you get caught flying, maybe, again, you're doing a real estate job, you're flying over someone's backyard, the neighbor just happens to be out sunbathing. That was a situation that happened just down the road from me here in Kentucky just a couple of years ago, actually. So I think that was more of a hobby fly. Again, I don't know all the circumstances around it, but that's a case where personal injury coverage could have picked up any type of monetary damages that person would have sued for.
Yeah, insurance. Don't leave home without it.
Exactly.
Well, Evan, thanks so much for getting with us tonight and taking time out of your schedule. I know it just looks like we spent 45 minutes here, but what everybody doesn't understand is you and I have been working on this for a couple of days, and we really do appreciate the fact that you took the time to do this. There's a lot involved in running a successful business, not the least of which is insurance. And for that, I hope this discussion has been really helpful. Gold Seal has a lot of live shows coming up for remote pilots. If you're working on your Part 107 certification, make sure to check out uavgroundschool.com, the only FAA-approved training program for remote pilots. And whether or not you have your Part 107 certificate, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's a lot of great content there, and more is on the way. So Evan Garmon, thank you again for leading this discussion, and to everyone else, good night and good flying.
Pass your Part 107 exam with Gold Seal, the nation's only FAA-approved ground training program for remote pilots. Take a free test drive today and see how easy it can be to pass your test with flying colors. Visit uavgroundschool.com.